Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us for this, the 6th webinar in our Data Science in the News series, jointly hosted by the Queensland Academy of Arts and Science and Queensland University of Technology's Centre for Data Science. My name is David Lovell, and I'm the Deputy Director of QUT's Centre for Data Science. Now, even though we're all experiencing this seminar online, we're all standing on the lands of Australia's First Nation owners. I would like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yugara as the First Nations owners on the lands where QUT now stands and pay respect to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits. We recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, research and learning, and we acknowledge the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders play within the QUT community. Now, when we began this seminar series on the 27th of March, my colleague, Professor Kerry Mangerson, said that the aim of these sessions was to focus on important issues that are affecting us and our society, and to explore the role of data and the analysis of those data in gaining insights into these issues. Now, the topic of that first session was, what can data tell us about COVID-19? Now, exactly 10 weeks later, today's topic is post-COVID-19. And 20 weeks ago, would any of us have predicted that the most important issue to affect us and our society in 2020 would be a submicroscopic strand of RNA wrapped in a protein shell? As the Danish proverb says, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. But that's where we'll all turn our attention to today, to the future, a future post-COVID-19. And to help us look to that future through a data science lens, we're very fortunate to be joined by 4 expert panelists. Marek Kowalkiewicz, Professor and Chair in Digital Economy at QUT. Hi, Marek. Dr. Ida Swong, COVID-19 Data Strategy Lead at Queensland Health. Hi, Ida. My colleague, Associate Professor James McGree, who leads the Data for Discovery Research Program in QUT Centre for Data Science, and Dr. Rick Clark, Director of Machine Intelligence and Novel Data Sources at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Welcome, friends. Each of our experts will give us a 5 or 6 minute glimpse through a data science lens into the future post-COVID. And they'll share their thoughts and perspectives. And while they're doing that, we as listeners can use the Q&A channel on this Zoom session, which you'll see at the bottom of the screen, to raise even more thought-provoking questions. In the latter half of our time together, I'll put these questions to our expert panel and look forward very much to hearing their insights. So let's get started. Now that we have flattened the curve of virus spread in Australia, and for the time being at least, our thoughts turn to other curves. Domestic product, the economy. And as we deal with new viral agents in our biosphere, in the sphere of economics, there are also new agents abroad. It's a great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Professor Marek Kowalkiewicz, to tell us more.
David, thank you very much for this introduction. It's truly a very exciting world that we're living in at the moment. Obviously, we have to deal with some short-term challenges that are caused by the global pandemic. As someone who's working, who's researching the business aspect of our world, I'm leading the digital economy team here at QUT. We're particularly interested in how the business world changes right now during the the COVID-19 pandemic, but also what will be the implications for the business world, for the economy, for the future. What we've seen so far is for obvious reasons, a huge impact on virtual commerce, on e-commerce, however you want to call it, the digital world in which we make purchases, in which we make transactions, in which we create value in the economy, and in which we consume value in the economy. We have seen some initial emergence of new initiatives, such as the first COVID-safe supply chains, because right now when we buy products, buy services, we want to make sure that we truly understand the origin of our products and services that we buy. Basically the whole supply chain. This already is putting quite a lot of strain on data scientists, on people who deal with information about products and services, but it's going to be even more with something that's pretty exciting and happening right now. So for the past couple of years, I've been specifically looking into the emergence of new economic agents in our economy. Economic agents are those entities that create and consume value in the economy. We are economic agents. Our organizations, businesses that we work for are economic agents. But the new type of economic agents that we see emerging are algorithms that act on our behalf, that are given our credit card in a figurative but often a very literal way. They're given our credit card and spend our money, but they also create value, and that value is being redirected to us. I loved your quote, David, at the beginning, where you quoted, "It is difficult to make predictions, especially about the future." I will not talk about the future. I'll talk about now, what is happening right now. We know that the future is already here, just not evenly distributed, right? We can already buy devices that make purchases on our behalf. There are smart dishwashers that purchase dishwashing liquid when they run low on it, and they basically make this transaction automatically. That gets delivered to us. As someone who's looking into all sorts of aspects of it, I'm slightly concerned, because what we're seeing is those hard-coded agents that basically do what they're told by their producers. That's creating a lot of unhealthy economic situations, and we'll need to look into it. The way we call those agents are so-called hard-coded algorithms, those that basically do what they're told by their developers. We'll soon see emergence of new type of agents, economic agents, so-called preference-based economic agents. These are algorithms that learn from us, learn our preferences, and make purchases on our behalf in response to those preferences. For those of you who work in the information retrieval space, terms like, or situations like this are very well known. Collaborative filtering is a field that I was quite active in a while back in the past, and we looked into it in the information retrieval space. But now it's basically moving to the commerce space. There will be another wave of agents as well. I call them inspirational agents. This will be algorithms that will try to predict our needs and sometimes surprise us with the decisions. What does it have to do with data science? A lot, it turns out. When I talk to people about smart fridges that buy beer that we like, one of the first questions that I hear from many of them is, how will you advertise to a fridge? How will you advertise to a fridge? This is where we're starting to talk about effectively something that I would call behavioral economics for robots. All right? We have a field of behavioral economics where we're trying to understand human behavior. What is happening right now is we will need to create algorithms that will understand behavior of other algorithms. Okay, for the technical among us, I'm talking about reverse engineering algorithms. For the less technical among us, I'm talking about really trying to understand their behavior and try to position the products, the services that we might be offering in such a way that they will choose them. This is where data scientists will step in, and there will be the cool new workforce, effectively, who will be able to help us work in this world. So I'm very excited about this future. I see a lot of potential of application of the data science tools and methods that we already know in this new field, in this new business field that is emerging. COVID-19, the pandemic right now has basically shifted our thinking. We're trying to stay at home in many cases. We don't want to go shopping. So we will try to automate a lot of what we're doing and get it delivered home. This is the opportunity for those new methods, for those new approaches to emerge. And I'm very excited about it. I'm happy to discuss this in today's session.
That's fantastic. Thinking about behavioral economics and how people respond to stimulus, I noted my almost Pavlovian response to your mention of the word beer in there. I'm not going to let you off the hook though, Marek, but we'll return to this in future, because I think the environment in which these economic agents are at play has really shifted. And so as we shift more of our life online, I think there's going to be some really interesting evolution at play, but we'll get to that in the Q&A session. It's time for our next presentation. And it dawned on me the other day that today's topic, post-COVID-19, is actually a bit of a misnomer, because the prefix post means after in time. But we are well and truly in the midst of things. And I don't see a prospect that this virus will suddenly disappear. Things really have changed and will continue to do so. And this is perhaps more apparent to those who look to the future in our health systems. So as COVID-19 data strategy lead for Queensland Health, Dr. Idis Wong is doing just that. And it's a privilege to welcome her to speak with us today. Idis.
Thank you, David. I might just do a share screen because I do have a few things prepared.
And that's great. We can see your screen perfectly. Thank you.
So I guess my talk is really about, don't let a good crisis go to waste. There is a lot of bad things that certainly is happening with COVID, with people's the societal, mental and physical health impact. But in terms of the data agenda, I think, there's certainly a lot of good things that could come out with how we handle COVID and driving our future digital and data agenda. So what we're doing in Queensland, I think a lot of people have heard about that flatten the curve, and David has talked about, the curve has well and truly flattened. How do we use data and intelligence in Queensland Health? It's really about anticipating the need and lift the health service capacity, understanding, the transmission rate and what is that going to look like in at first could be the next week or week after, in 10 weeks time. What do we need to do to make sure our health service capacity would be able to cope with not just patients with COVID, but also our normal patients with non-COVID, maternity care, neonates, all those other people that need health services, we need for them as well. So I think you guys probably talk about, have heard about PPEs, so making sure that we have enough PPEs, making sure we have enough workforce, and if we don't, then how do we get that, those sort of trends. I thought it's really appropriate to describe our COVID data journey with the Seneca quote that if one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. So in the first couple of weeks in particular, it's a daily rhythm of what I call data dumpster fire. So there are issues in terms of data and reporting, you go and fix that. And then 2 hours later, you move on to another emergency reporting issue. So daily, it could just feels like you're trying to, keep on top of things. And every day it feels very much the same. But I think it's really important to keep an eye on the future in what we are getting towards. in addition to dealing in these daily crises. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's important. So this one is a little bit about our Queensland Health data journey map in how we handle COVID. So a lot of these that you've seen in dashboards, I think in Queensland, Australia, and internationally, it's very descriptive, describing location of cases, case characteristics, even where the cases are, where the target areas. Undoubtedly, that's really important to describing to our health services and also to the public that we know where these cases are, where are these hotspots, describing the trend. But we can't stop there. What we really need to do is build in predictive ability and patient journey, for prospective data modeling as well. So anticipating how activity could impact on transmission at both a statewide and also a health service regional level, and also build in the data system that we can track these patients over time. It's great they recover from COVID, but what if they have long-term, for example, kidney issues? We need to be able to build a platform that we can monitor and also do early interventions that may be necessary for the future. These data analytics platforms are especially important because, post-COVID or with COVID, for future pandemics, syndromic surveillance for flu season in, season out, but also for chronic diseases management, for COPD, for a range of other issues that would be very important to do. So I think I want to go back in the whack-a-mole scenario, is that in the COVID environment, we can't go solving every data problem that is out there. You might feel that you really want to, but it is important to think what is urgent is not necessarily what's important. Now, noting that in a pandemic environment, you can't necessarily delegate, the non-important urgent stuff to other areas. Sometimes you really just have to take it, but you might have to develop a solution that get us from A to B with the option to scale up as necessary and move on to other things. And what's really key as well is that keep an eye on the really important things that may not be urgent, but it's really important for us to set up for our future. So for example, the long-term digital patient journey. So understanding when there's an opportunity to say, to get buy-in and do those things and harness those opportunities so we can set up for the future. So that's my talk, and I'm just going to stop screen share and wait for the questions later.
That's great, Iris. That's really fantastic. One of the things, as I was listening, it made me realize I was forgetting that there are other pressing health issues other than COVID-19. And these are significant and challenging in their own right. And I think what your talk highlights and what Marek's talk highlighted is that we are bound together by the resources that we share, whether those are the health system resources or the economy or the environment. Human beings are on the planet in such a scale that we can't live our lives independently. We truly are all in this together. So thanks, Iris, and thanks for sketching out a really well considered digital health agenda there, looking at moving from more descriptive to more diagnostic and more predictive side of things. And this health agenda needs many talented and dedicated people to bring it into being. And our next speaker is one such person. So Associate Professor James McGree is working through the Digital Health Cooperative Research Centre to create a national platform that will help us to respond to the current and to future health crises. I'm delighted to welcome James to talk with us about the COVID-19 Clinical Data Analytics Platform. James.
Thanks very much, David. Really appreciate that. So yeah, today I want to talk about the Clinical Data Analytics Platform, or CDAP for short. And before I get started, I just want to say this is joint work with colleagues from QUT, USyd, Monash, and Queensland and New South Wales Health. So The need for rapid access and utilization to health data has really been brought into sharp focus by the outbreak of COVID-19. With little known about the disease, as I understand it anyway, patients have actually been treated in an information void. So what this means is clinicians haven't had access to diagnostic, treatment, and outcome data at a national level. So as a consequence, this has really limited what lessons could be learned quickly from previous cases, meaning that it limited the evidence base that could be developed to inform patient care. What has also become evident in this pandemic is the need for rapid but rigorous methods for evaluating potential treatments for COVID-19 patients, as obviously finding out what works and what doesn't work as quickly as possible has obvious health and economic benefits. So key to this is sharing data to learn quickly, but also the use of more modern clinical trial designs and sharing the data with those and having the infrastructure to run those. So this pandemic has highlighted, I think, the need for new digital health solutions that enable cross-jurisdiction, cross-state data sharing and analytics. So this need led to a proposal to develop CDAP for COVID-19 and was subsequently funded by the Digital Health CRC. And the basic premise of CDAP is represented in this diagram here. So you can see there are three components. One is data capture. So this is all about developing digital infrastructure to capture, access, securely store, all that sort of stuff to do with the data. Another component is governance, and this is all about ensuring we have the appropriate informed consent and governance structures in place so that we're using data ethically and only for the intended purposes. And the last component is analytics. So this is all about translating the data we're capturing into something we can use to inform clinical decision-making to improve patient care. So what does CDAP mean for COVID-19? Well, CDAP is capturing secure and nationally consistent clinical, laboratory, and image data for COVID-19 patients, and is providing access to authorized users nationally, okay? Secondly, CDAP is enabling analytics of these data to inform best evidence patient care. So as an example, Anne Nicholson from Monash is building a Bayesian network from these data to try and predict prognosis for COVID-19 patients. And this type of model could provide, for example, the probability of a given patient needing hospitalization, needing to go to ICU, and maybe even potentially predict the response to a particular intervention or treatment. Thirdly, CDAP will enable what are called Bayesian adaptive clinical trials, and these are aimed at improving prevention, detection, and treatment of COVID-19. And actually, we had some success in the recent MRFF round where we were successful in getting a trial funded. And this trial is called, as you can see here, repurposing existing medications to reduce severe acute respiratory distress in COVID-19 patients. And this is led out of UNSW by Meg Jardin and her team. And the hope is that CDAP can actually facilitate this trial, provide the infrastructure and analytics for this trial. And lastly, despite the very good news that COVID-19 hasn't spread as far and as wide in Australia as we first thought it might, there's still over 7,000 people in Australia who have tested positive to COVID-19. So we're interested in tracking these patients in the long term, as identified by IDES, and investigate things like persisting morbidities, long-term effects, susceptibility reinfection, and things like that. So to give you a bit of an idea of how CDAP is being embedded within our health systems, we can see this diagram here, and CDAP's in the middle, and it interfaces with all these different data sources. So for example, electronic health records, GP data, case report forms, etc. But within CDAP, you can see some feedback arrows, and these are really important, and they denote that ongoing data collection is continually being fed back into the system to update models, update statistical models, and therefore update the support it can provide for clinicians and clinical decision making. This is also how we can facilitate Bayesian adaptive clinical trials. because ongoing responses in that trial can actually be used to update and inform future treatment allocations. So to close, the COVID-19 pandemic has really enabled us to develop the infrastructure to allow us to work efficiently across state jurisdictions, and provided a template for us to do this for other diseases and conditions. So one thing to note is that CDAP is actually disease and condition agnostic. So what we do have now is the capabilities and infrastructure to tackle national level health problems, and we have the access to the data and the analytics to do that. Indeed, we're trying to set this up now currently for orthopedic surgery data, and we're trying to do that at the national level. So if you'd like more information about CDAP, you can see the homepage there for the platform, and obviously you can contact people on the project like Matt Bellegarde, Nick Steps, or myself. So thank you, and over to you, David.
James, thanks. Look, I know COVID-19 has brought incredible difficulties and challenges and harms for so many people, but to think that it's actually catalyzing productive change in terms of how we harness data to shape our future in positive ways is really encouraging. So thank you very much for that, James. And you know, that's an excellent overview of a nationwide clinical data analytics platform. And our final speaker for today is also working with data at a national level. And as we will learn, looking at new and untapped data sources to inform our understanding of Australia today and its possible futures. So Dr. Rick Clark is Director of Machine Intelligence and Novel Data Sources at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. And after talking with him in the lead up to this seminar, I know the future for the next 5 minutes will be fascinating for all of us. Welcome, Rick.
All right. Thanks, David. I might see if I can share my screen. All right. All right, is that visible to people?
That's looking great.
Okay. So let me start with a bit of an introduction. The ABS is progressively onboarding a range of new data sources that might provide timely and relevant insights about the economic, social, and demographic impacts of the COVID-19 crisis. So this work's being coordinated by a new group within the ABS that was formed in March, the COVID-19 Statistical Task Force, with two broad and largely overlapping objectives in mind. The first objective is to mitigate the potential risk of information loss in critical economic collections due to declining survey response rates. So this is about protecting the ABS's key statistical outputs. And the second objective is to meet the information needs of government decision makers in areas where there's rapid change or where there are complex questions about policy or service delivery or the investment of public money. Following on what Ides was saying, I mean, not wanting to waste a great crisis, right? We're taking the opportunity to make non-traditional data sources widely available in the ABS for future statistical production. That's beyond the current scope of the current national COVID-19 response. And to achieve it, what the ABS is doing is piloting 5 big data sources for a variety of statistical applications, and also at the same time building strategic capability in the uptake and systematic use of such sources for official statistics. So what data sources? Well, let me start by saying that it's true that the ABS is currently very reliant on data collected from surveys, censuses, and administrative programs of government. So these are the 2 boxes shown in the bottom right-hand part of this diagram. But as we all know, the spectacular growth of the internet has created a rich array of human and machine generated data sources that could conceivably be used for the production of official statistics. And in fact, as government has moved its operations into the digital world, administrative data has increasingly started to take on some of the characteristics of the more novel big data sources. So the types of data that the ABS is pursuing in the current tranche of COVID-19 work, I've indicated those with the orange boxes. The purple boxes indicate data sources that we've previously done some experimental work with, satellite imagery, telematics devices for freight movement. And the ones in green are obviously things that we currently use in production. So we use supermarket scanner data, for example, in producing CPI statistics. But the ones that we're focusing on in COVID-19 are the ones in orange. And at this stage, we're looking to make use of aggregate data at a level of granularity that actually protects the privacy of individual persons, households, and businesses, but at the same time maximizes the analytical utility. Now, as an example of how these data sources could be used, consider the case of business energy consumption from smart meter data, right, which is the third dot point. This can actually reveal what types of businesses have closed down or reduced their activity as a result of COVID-19 shutdown. So that's an immediate use within the current context of the COVID-19 crisis. But longer term, understanding the characteristics of household and business energy use is actually very important for government energy policy, especially as Australia moves to more sustainable sources. So to help us to systematize the onboarding of these new data sources, we're developing both a standardized mechanism for ongoing data acquisition and also an enterprise-wide environment for data use. A key component of the work is a new cloud-based data science environment that provides our analysts with a scalable infrastructure, as well as a suite of up-to-date analytical tools. In the first iteration of the platform, and this is already in place, and being evaluated with samples of real data from these new sources, we're focused on single touch payroll and bank transactions. And I can come back to these in the question and answer and give you a bit more detail. But the architecture and the infrastructural components are actually still evolving. In the second iteration, we're expecting to incorporate a new analytical paradigm for tackling complex policy problems that's being developed by our methodology division. So you can see from the diagram that the data workspace is deployed in an AWS cloud platform. It makes use of Redshift data warehouses and an S3 file format. We're using SageMaker for machine learning, QuickSight for exploratory analysis and visualization, and our analysts will have access to Jupyter Notebooks, R and Python. So that's pretty standard with a lot of data science groups now, but it's actually new for us. So what insights? I previously mentioned supporting the analysis of complex problems. So to unpack this a bit, let me start by saying that the profile of information need amongst policy analysts in government is actually changing. And increasingly, analysts want to use a broad evidence base to draw purpose-specific insights about interrelated issues. So the diagram I've got here actually is an example of what I mean. You can see from even a cursory analysis that the policy areas that I've got up here are deeply interconnected. You know, you could say export success drives economic growth, which in turn creates jobs. But of course, as there are changes in global markets, some industries are going to grow, others are going to dwindle. And so there is a consequential restructuring of national and regional economies, and that'll determine what kinds of jobs are created and the kinds of skills that are going to be in demand. As a result of this, some workers will find jobs, but others will be displaced and they'll possibly enter the welfare system. Vocational skills development can help displaced workers transition back into the workforce. So you can see that there's a spider web of interconnections between these policy issues. You can't make policy decisions, intervention in one area without sort of ripple effects onto other things. And the other thing to note here is that there isn't a predetermined order of doing analysis. The investigation can follow a quite adaptive path, and there are no rigid boundaries in these policy areas. Each question sort of is indicative of a larger policy concern, and the concerns have dynamic interdependencies that are often very difficult to articulate. So we think that this fundamental interconnectedness between policy problems frames how we understand the overall picture and how information should be brought together in order to solve the problems. The other thing to note is that each policy area involves sort of different but interrelated systems of interacting entities, and different patterns emerging as a result of their collective behaviour and the intervention of external factors. And the government is one of those factors by actually delivering new services or putting in place new policy. It's influencing the system and its behaviour. So what do we want to do about this, or what's the ABS trying to do about this? Well, I previously mentioned that Methodology Division is developing an analytical paradigm that meets the needs of analysts dealing with these sort of complex problems. The work that we're doing, and it's been predominantly R&D, but it's now leading to a production level system. Okay, it's culminated in this next generation analytical platform that we call GLIDE. Graph-linked information discovery environment. And we developed this to demonstrate new ways of representing, combining, and analyzing information in a range of complex decision-making scenarios. The key ideas that sort of underpin GLIDE are indicated in the slide. I probably won't go through all of them given time, but just to mention the first one is that we want to take a system-centric perspective so that we can join up the interrelated concept and data spaces and be able to connect individuals and groups in multiple ways. By computable semantics, I mean allowing observations of the concepts to be consistently interpreted across disparate sources by representing the meaning of those concepts in a machine interpretable way. And what this also allows then is the automated, the use of machine reasoning systems to automate the knowledge discovery process. I'll skip to the last one. By analytical, adaptive analytical pathways, I mean allowing different types of analysis to be interleaved, right? So exploration or pattern sensing, finding statistical features and correlations in data, explanation or model building, which is testing hypotheses about the observed data, and then extrapolation or system simulation, which is projecting beyond our known cases. I use the word prediction quite carefully because in complex systems, prediction is fraught because there are lots of feedback loops that can influence the way the system goes depending on the kind of actions that are taken. So I'll stop it there and basically go to any questions. And I might have gone over time, so I apologise for that.
Rick, your timing's impeccable. That's just great. I would like to thank you, Rick, and all our experts for sharing their stimulating and insightful presentations. I also want to thank the audience for the questions and the positive feedback that's been coming in. We'll turn to those questions in a sec. I just want to remind everyone that you can put your questions via the Q&A channel on Zoom. Speaking of Zoom, we're going to finish this session a few minutes before the hour so everyone can get to their next Zoom meeting. But until then, I want to put some questions to our panelists. And I think the first question that I'd like to pitch is, this one comes from Alexander Hanish. And it was aimed at you, Idis, but I think this is something where each member of the panel has something interesting to say. So the question is, what data sources are you using to inform your decisions, and what's on your wish list?
So I think I've just typed an answer to it, which is really long. But in summary, so many data sources. We have, volume of tests done, test by location. So we want to know, where the tests being done. Are people not presenting themselves to tests? Obviously, people would have seen a range of epi information out there in cases and those sort of things. Also, number of people being self-isolated and quarantined, we get those. We also want to keep an eye on the non-COVID patients as well, specifically those we know with COPD and chronic diseases patients. Are they presenting themselves to hospitals? If not, are they doing okay? We want that data. So ICU capacity, hospital capacity, PPEs, where are they? Where's the distribution? How long are they going to arrive? Those sort of things across Queensland. I think it's worth remembering that Queensland is a huge place. Some places are easier to get data, whereas some regional areas, the quality of the data sometimes may not be the level that we want as well. There are also mobility and economic activities data that we are getting. So public transport, volume usage, road usage, transaction data. So we keep an eye on how people are opening up society and how people are traveling, so that we can keep an eye on transmission as we move forward. So that's in summary.
That's great. Rick, can you just remind me, were all of these data sources on your list of the novel data sources that the ABS are exploring, or are there some in that aren't yet in scope for consideration?
They're all potentially in scope for consideration. And in fact, we are. I haven't actually indicated, with an orange or a green accounting systems, but in fact, I should have actually indicated that that's also an orange, in the sense that single touch payroll system, which gives us fantastic information about wages and salary, is provided through SDP enabled accounting software, right? Environmental monitors, all of these things are of interest to us. It's just a question of how much we can actually do in a short space of time. So the ones that we've focused on to start with are those that have multiple applications. We can see more than one use case, which is very compelling, which has a short-term application in terms of addressing information needs for COVID, but also enduring usage for some of the larger and more complex policy problems that have been identified when we've talked to other government agencies. I'll give you an example, just positioning data, which gives us sort of location and mobility. Of course, we can think about, how this can be used to identify foot traffic, to businesses, or whether people are staying at home or, or moving around. But longer term, there is real interest from policy agencies in understanding the patterns of movement of temporary populations, and so an area like Canberra, which is a regional hub, there is a lot of movement in and out of Canberra on a daily basis and a seasonal basis, which we're not capturing particularly well at the moment through survey-based mechanisms. I think
there are also some interesting questions about data access involved in this. Idis, you wanted to raise a point.
Yeah, I think one of the issue, and I guess that's not an issue, it's a good thing that we don't have that many cases, right? And that's a great thing. Unfortunately, in comparison to other international modelling, there are limits to some of the modelling that we have done because we don't have that many cases. It exposed individuals with COVID to being identifiable in some of the things that we might want to do. So there are some of the trade-offs that we're experiencing here as a result of the great public health effort.
I just want to go back to Alex's question about data sources and put this now to James with respect to the CDAP. For that platform, James, what sorts of data sources are being entertained? Is it through, I guess, standard sort of clinical trial approaches? Is that the sort of data you're looking at, or are you entertaining other sources as well?
Yeah, thanks, David. So within CDAP, our focus is really improving primary patient care. So any data or analytics that can help clinicians do that would be our focus. And we're really driven by the clinicians on the team, that they guide us through what data are important and or might be important to collect and use to help inform that. And so for COVID-19, we spent a lot of time thinking about what data to collect and use in CDAP. And indeed, this might change over time as we learn more about the disease. But I think it's more, we need to be guided by the experts, the clinicians, about what is actually important. And I suspect this will differ from different conditions, different diseases. But, you know, as you saw on the diagram, we've got lots of data sources already available to us: electronic health records, GP data, all that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And now I'm really curious, Marek, when it comes to thinking about the economic agents that are going to be part of our lives in this post-COVID future, what data sources are they drawing on?
This is an excellent question and an excellent point. In fact, this is one of the biggest challenges for the economists that are trying to understand this new world, the world of digital economy, where you have algorithmic agents. It's hard, mostly because most of those interactions right now are happening between individual algorithms and service providers, or other endpoints. So in reality, what is happening right now is we're completely blind to those data exchanges, and all we can rely on is all sorts of proxy measures, which are never as good as the actual data. So all I can say at the moment is we're trying to figure out how to measure the digital economy. This is one of the biggest areas in this space, and whether it's through proxy data or direct access to data. The direct access to data effectively requires new legislation. Just like markets, some areas of markets are regulated. Some data sources in sort of the traditional physical world are regulated, and we get access to the data, or people or groups that need to get access to the data do get access to the data. The digital economy in many ways is still very much a wild west, where those rules are still missing. It's good for those who enjoy being cowboys in the wild west, but we're still trying to figure out who the sheriffs are and how do they keep everyone else in check. So I'd love to be able to give you a more specific answer, but that's the nature of this space. We still don't know.
No, look, I understand, and I think the Wild West isn't a bad analogy at all, because I think the pandemic is leading us to confront a range of issues at a much higher rate than we might have planned to do that. I want to put this next question, which follows on from your comments, Marek, to Rick. Australians far and wide love and trust the Australian Bureau of Statistics for being a reliable source of information. And part of that is that the ABS takes great care with the way in which that information is sampled, and the fact that it's providing, insights that are representative and that we can generalize from. You're talking about a whole new world of observational data. So, what are your thoughts on taking that observational data and using it as a basis for broader policy? Is this something that keeps you awake at night, or are you relaxed about that prospect?
So there are a number of ways to answer that question. I mentioned that we had we're developing a systematic onboarding process for each of these data sources, and as part of that, we're identifying sort of critical issues that we need to pay early attention to as we bring sources in and start to utilize them to get, statistically, valid insights from. So clearly, data volume and speed are critical. Are we going to overwhelm, our internal systems? Data quality, the extent of missing and erroneous and inconsistent observations. Data fidelity is a critical one. It's, how well are the observations actually capturing the concepts of interest, and, what kinds of bias are present in the data. And this is one of the reasons why we haven't been pursuing social media as much as some of the other data sources, because of kind of the self-selection representation biases that exist in data sources of that kind.
I hadn't noticed that was an issue, Donald Trump. So look.
And I think one of the things that's very important for us, right, is we need to ensure that the data that we receive is properly protected, so that the privacy of the respondents is respected, and that applies to how the data is actually retained, how it's shared, how it's exposed, and how it's integrated. And related to that we're actually moving in line with community expectations about how that data should be used. So social license, whether the acquisition and use of the data is consistent with community expectations and the public trust that the ABS, that the community places in the ABS. So we have frameworks that we're applying to this, and perhaps in offline discussions I can express that in a bit more detail. But
I actually think that's fertile territory for future data science in the news. That issue about social license to operate, public trust, also themes to do with reproducibility and so forth. I'm mindful of time. I want to put a quick question to each of the panelists in order of the way it was presented. So it's going to start with you, Marek. Get ready for this question. If you're going to name one top data challenge that you are facing or mindful of in the work that you've described, what would that be, Marek Kowalkiewicz?
So I'll speak to what I also mentioned in response to your previous question, David. One of the biggest data challenges for us in understanding this new world of digital economy is actually getting access to primary data sources. And so whoever figures out the way of doing it, and whatever it involves using legislation or basically being very smart about understanding what's happening in the economy, in that new part of the economy, that's going to be a major progress in the space of digital economy.
Understood. Idis, your top data challenge, what would you nominate?
People. I love people, but my task is to make people see what is feasible and achievable and what we should absolutely do for the future. I think in a pandemic environment, everyone is knee deep in cleaning the gutter, and sometimes it is hard to make them see the possibility and working outside their usual confines, both in terms of timeframes and also process. So a big part of our job is trying to dynamite those obstacles and make them see the future.
Wow. So let me just be clear. You're not talking about people in general. You're talking about the sorts of people who are empowered to make decisions and shape how resources are applied, right?
That's right. So as soon as they mention risks and barriers, I sort of do a long blink and go, okay, let's just grab a coffee.
All right. Okay. So from Marek, Access, from IDIS, People, James, what would you nominate as a data challenge that's front of your mind?
Yeah, so Marek stole mine, so I'll go for my second major one, and that would be ensuring we've got the right governance structures in place. So this is really important for health data, to ensure that we're using the data ethically and in an informed consent way. So this is nothing new, but the whole point of CDAP is so that we can do this really efficiently. So every time I want to do an analysis, I don't want to have to go back and do a whole new ethics application. I just want to be able to run the analysis. And because we're doing this and our focus is on primary patient care, as long as we're under that umbrella, we are good. So as long as our analysis fits in with that, we're using the data as we should. And that's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think anyone who's ever been involved with any form of ethics application would, those comments would resonate. Okay, so Access, People, Governance. Rick, your data science challenge, what would you nominate?
I'm going to support Marek's view on this one. I think access is a critical issue, and it's critical because of the privacy and social license trust issues that we talked about previously, but also because data is increasingly an asset with commercial value. And so the custodians of privately held data sets are often reluctant to share those for a number of reasons. Often they use the data to produce, analytical insights, which are, they then market. And so for an organization like the ABS, which is producing statistical insights of the economy and, society, the environment, and so on, those insights can often undermine the commercial value of what private companies actually produce. So they may be very reluctant to share the data if they think there's competition. But there are also other reasons in that government can formulate policy or can change, the service profile, and in a way that actually undermines the commercial viability of companies or affects their market position. And so they may be reluctant to share data for that reason. We'd like to really get access to the most granular data that we can get, as unit level data, so that we can integrate it. But for a number of reasons, we have to compromise, and make use of aggregate data, for the reasons we just talked about. So
I think it's absolutely fascinating that data science is often seen as a very technical field with a strong focus on algorithms. Yet everything that we've discussed here is about how that data science, how those algorithms intersect with some very real human issues to do with access, to do with people making decisions about where we apply our efforts, talking also about how we govern that and ensure we have good social license to operate. Look, I would be delighted to keep talking for the rest of the afternoon, but it is time for us to draw this session to a close. Panelists will actually have a chance to respond to the questions that we've been receiving in writing after the seminar, and these are going to be posted on our website along with a recording of this session. Panelists, on behalf of all our listeners and viewers, I want to thank you each for your time, for your insights, and for your efforts in facing a post-COVID-19 future. I would like to thank also the Queensland Academy of Arts and Science and Queensland University of Technology Centre for Data Science for initiating and hosting this seminar series. Stay tuned to our website for announcements of the next session, which will be coming up soon. And a special shout out to our colleague Joyce Wang for her technical support and brilliant work behind the scenes. I'm David Lovell, and until next time, go well.